Always go with your instincts. It could be said that was the formula that helped real estate tycoon Don Peebles build his generational wealth, creating fortune from scratch. We'll dive into his formula and how he did it for our Forbes BLK 50, Building Wealth Through Real Estate. Hello everyone, this is Jabari Young and I am here in Miami at the Bath Club and is owned by Mr. Don Peebles. He is the CEO of Peebles Corporation, the largest and most successful Black-owned real estate development company in the United States. I get that right?
Yes.
Oh, great. That's phenomenal. Mr. Peebles, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for allowing us into this beautiful club in the Bath House, Bath Club. Definitely get into how you did it, building wealth and all of that. But I have to ask you, we're here now, it's end of 2024, heading into 2025. What's the year been like for you overall?
It's been an exciting year. I mean, look, there's been a lot of change in my industry, driven by the economics and interest rates, but there's tremendous opportunity. And so it's been a good year and we're doing some exciting things. We're going to start off 2025 with some new and exciting things and also expand our core business, which is development around the country.
Yeah. When you think about your career, right, and everything that you've done, 30 plus years in real estate, what has been your biggest positive surprise about everything that you've done?
The change in the industry. I think that, you know, the change in the industry and the business climate from when I started to where we are today. And I think that's been probably the most exciting and the most enjoyable and the most optimistic and actually the most emotional because it's been up and down. And what I mean by that is, access to opportunity for everybody, and especially Black Americans. When I started my career, I had the great fortune of coming out of the civil rights movement, and I started my career in the late 1970s, in 1979, and really got going in the 1980s. And there was an environment of great opportunity for Black entrepreneurs because Black people and Black men and women were running the cities. They were emerging as leaders. The mayors of major cities in the U.S. Were African Americans, and their focus was economic empowerment. And so I got a lot of benefit from that. And then it changed, but now we're swinging in a different direction.
How about negative surprise? What's been the biggest negative surprise over the course of your career?
It got harder as I grew, as opposed to my expectations were that, hey, when I break these barriers and when I get going and I get the company going, it'll become easier and the headwinds will be lessened. And it was the opposite. It got harder every step of the way because I was going into territory that people didn't feel I belonged in. And as a result of that, that got harder. So that would be the biggest disappointment. I think that what I found is that there is systemic discrimination with the deployment of capital. And I think that is the number one headwind that most Black businesses confront. But in that is an opportunity.
Well, so much to talk about, and definitely want to get into the business side, but I always like to start by getting into the dad side. Because you're a parent, 2 kids, a son and a girl, and I always want to ask the girl dads, what is it like being a girl dad since I'm one of them? What's it like for you? What's it been like?
It's a wonderful experience. It's a joyous experience, as you know. There's nothing like a father-daughter relationship. And that starts from the beginning. The bond starts very early. And earlier than boys, I have a son who I love dearly and we are business partners. But a daughter I can be softer with. I can indulge a bit more. I feel, even though some people may look at that in the wrong way politically, but it gave me the opportunity to be a softer person. Out here in the business world, I've had to be tough, and I've had to make tough decisions for the betterment of my company and the betterment of my family. But having a daughter let me relax and let me be, a softer, kind of warmer person. But it's different, by the way, because we've got to also instill high expectations in them, and let them know also that they can have dreams of limitless opportunity, and that's one thing that I'm happier to see. My daughter being an adult in this time period in America is a very different place than, say, my mother being an adult. And so there's tremendous opportunity for her.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited by it, but it's been a wonderful experience, and I've been an athletically supporting father. My daughter is a lifelong, almost equestrian. She started riding when she was 4 years old. She's been competitive since she was 5. She's on TCU's equestrian team as well, and I get to watch her compete. And the lessons and the excitement of doing that. So she's been an important and large part of my life.
Yeah. What about you? You know, I was asking your assistant Kendall, and she was so impressive about Don Peebles. She said he sees people, right? You see people all the time. So in this era where everyone wants to be seen, here you are seeing people. Why do you do that?
Well, because I think that, I want to see how people live. I want to see people, and understand their dreams so I can help some of them achieve that. I do think that, a big part of what happens is that, and I've noticed that many successful entrepreneurs and people who accumulate some wealth make great steps to kind of insulate themselves. And I've never been one who wants to insulate myself. I like to be on the ground. I like to know people. I'm a people person, and I enjoy meeting people from all aspects of life. And also I think that, I can offer people, a different perspective too. And I operate from the perspective that just because I've made a few dollars doesn't make me any
more than
better.
a few.
Well, but I mean, in reality,
Yeah.
it doesn't make me any different. It means that I got luckier, and I got some better breaks, and and I had good fortune, but I'm still who I am. And I'm still the son of an auto mechanic, and my mother started as a secretary and then got into real estate. I'm the grandson of a janitor and a hotel doorman, and that's who I am.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy, meeting people, and I think I also have a responsibility. I should be available for entrepreneurs, especially black entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs or black students who have dreams. I should be a resource to them to where they could call upon and say, well, what's it like? Or what can I do to advance my life? What can I do to grow my business? How can I get access to this opportunity? And I should be there. And any of my colleagues who are successful black entrepreneurs, I think we all have a responsibility to help provide opportunities and to be mentors to other black entrepreneurs and black students and young people who are looking to achieve their dreams.
Yeah. For someone who didn't know you, I mean, obviously, can you see people, but for someone who didn't know you, how would you describe yourself in one word?
Humble.
Why humble?
I think it's something I've made a strong effort to do, to not change. I really did not want, felt good about who I was as a human being, and so I did not want to be like what I saw happen with many other people, is to let some level of success or prominence change me. And so I really tried to do that, and I think it all starts with being humble, having some humility, knowing that for the grace of God, I got to do a few exciting things. I worked hard, but I got the strengths from my father, the car mechanic, my grandfather, the doorman, my grandfather, the janitor and farmer. I mean, I got my mother working hard, coming up against all kinds of obstacles. So, I mean, I didn't do it by myself. I got a lot of lessons from them, and those were very, very valuable lessons that I have worked hard to try to give my own kids those kinds of lessons. And so I think that, who I am is somebody who, doesn't, really think I'm any better than anybody else, because I'm not.
Yeah. What's it like being CEO of a real estate development company? Like, how is that for you every single day? You wake up and you live in beautiful Miami and you get the chance to see the palm trees when you're in Florida, because I know you're all over the place. But what's that job like as CEO of a real estate development company, especially the largest black real estate development company in this country?
It's hard. It can be enjoyable. There are days that it's enjoyable, but it is a lot of work, and it's a struggle. It's a fight each day. We're always trying to grow, but it also allows me to be somewhat creative. But most importantly, what it does is it gives me the opportunity to make some impact. And I believe in using business as a tool of transformation. And so that aspect of the business I really do enjoy. I can, give businesses and people opportunities. And we can do some things that are different, and then we can stand in or walk in or sit in something that I and our company have worked for to produce. And so that's pleasant, but it's not as easy as anybody thinks it is. It's definitely not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, you kind of went and you mentioned it before about, growing up, mom, right, had you at age 19. Your dad was a mechanic, and your grandfather, your mother's father, worked at a hotel. One of the hotel you owned, the one down the street from where he used to work at. But what did a young Don Peebles want to be before he discovered real estate, before he even discovered that he wanted to be a doctor, right? Because I know I wanted to be a fireman at one point.
Yeah.
What did you want to be then when you were just watching television as a kid?
I wanted to be actually an auto mechanic, like my father.
Like your dad.
So my father, when I was born, he got a job before I was born, he was a car mechanic at a car dealership. And then he got a job through my grandfather working in a clerical position in the federal government. And he had a part-time job. He set up his own business and had a part-time business of repairing cars, of friends and family members, and got referrals and so forth. And so on Saturdays, as I got older, I'd work with him. But he would always say, "Hey, no, you're not going to do this. The expectations are much higher." He said, "I want you to be." His whole thing was, "I want you to be better than me." And I would say, "Oh, well, no, I don't want to be better than you, because I'm not going to be able to do that." He said, "Well, I want you to do something different." And so I kind of, observed, and but after that, I didn't really think about it as much until I was about 13 or so, and I grew. I was pretty tall at that point, and I thought, okay, maybe. And I played basketball, so I tried out for my junior high school team, made the team, ended up becoming a starter in 8th grade, and then I played in high school, and I thought maybe I could play in the NBA, but I didn't grow. But I thought I could play college sport. And then after that, I kind of got exposed to Capitol Hill because my mother arranged for me to be a page on the Hill for the House of Representatives, and that changed my life. It opened up a whole different perspective for me.
A whole new world. Yeah. When you take it back to your dad, what do you think the biggest trait that you learned from him?
Hard work. He was willing. I think I got two things from him, I think, that are really kind of core for me. One of them was hard work. Hard work, and then two, he was never would ask anyone for anything else. He was extremely self-sufficient. So he would only, do what he could do himself. And so I got both of those from him, and probably in my business, I get, kidded a bit by my son, is that I don't want to ask people for capital to invest in our businesses. I've figured out ourselves, and so when we grow our business, we grow it through institutional investors, but I built a company that's pretty self-sufficient. Yeah. And so, but I got those two things from him. Yeah.
You go on to Rutgers, and obviously you leave early because you want to go and help your mom, and the Capitol Hill story kind of runs its course. But the college, that topic is very interesting as we fast forward for a quick moment nowadays, because that talk of should you go to college? It's expensive, the cost, the debt, right? I pay student loans all the time. It's not fun, right? Is that something that you would advise a young person to maybe think about? Hey, you don't have to go to college route, because again, you went and it didn't work out for you. You left, and you still, here you are, a successful entrepreneur in real estate. If you were talking to that young person today coming out of high school who just was not sure if college was the route for them and they didn't want to take on the debt, how would you, seeing that person, how would you advise them?
It's a very interesting question. My mother told me when I was a senior in high school picking schools, she said you don't need to go to college because you shouldn't be a doctor, and unless you're going to be a lawyer, you shouldn't go. And if you're going to go into real estate, you can do that differently. I was hell-bent on going to college. So I would tell people that if you don't have a clear pathway as to what you want to do, then I would delay going to college until I figured that pathway out. And then if I knew the pathway, then I would ask myself, is going to college the solution? As an entrepreneur, I don't think that college is necessarily the answer. There was one of the stories written about me years ago, or I was included in, it was called Hail to the College Dropouts. And it had Bill Gates, me, Buffett, Bill Gates, me, Larry Ellison, and a few others who had dropped, Zuckerberg, and so on. And for me, I realized it was a waste of time for me at the end of my freshman year. I mean, I spent my last 2 years of high school on Capitol Hill as a page and then an intern for 3 very powerful members of Congress. And so I went to school from 6 in the morning until 10:30, and then walked across the street from the Library of Congress to the Capitol, of the U.S. Capitol, to go to work. And then I worked until 6 or 7 o'clock every day, and then practiced basketball. My practices started at 7 p.m. and got home and did my homework and got to bed about midnight and got up at 4 in the morning. So I was busy.
Yeah.
College was an anticlimactic experience. But what was a big moment for me is I was sitting in a political science class, and the professor was telling us all how legislation got done in the Congress. And I kept telling him he was wrong because I just spent 2 years working there. And that kind of stuck with me. And I was like, wow, he's just wrong on this. I mean,
imagine all the other stuff he's teaching you wrong.
Exactly. And once I decided, I decided I wasn't going to go into medicine, and I did that in my freshman year. Then I said, okay, I got to figure it out. Yeah. And I kind of hung on a little bit, and took some classes at University of Maryland while I was beginning to work. But then after that, I just curated my education. I took real estate classes that could help me in business, and I started off as an appraiser, so I took lots of appraisal classes, and I take them as crash courses. You could go away for 2 weeks or something and take the full class. And so I would do that and go travel around the country a little bit to do that and get educated. And then I just taught myself the business. Yeah. And I would recommend someone who wants to be an entrepreneur to look at that. And I never worked for anybody after the time I was maybe 23. I never worked for anybody again.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into it, right? Because, I was asking friends, they all want to know how people like yourself build their wealth, right? And step one, though, like, how did you build your real estate development firm? Like, what is the very first thing you had to do? You're coming out of D.C., right? Your appraisal business, you have the relationships intact, right? Because you work for Marion Barry, but what is still that first step? Because a young real estate developer may be watching this, and he may not have seen you yet, but he's watching this or she's watching this. What would you tell him? This is the very first step you need to do.
Find the opportunity, but be open to it. I think I was scouring for opportunities, but looking at my niche, and I think you got to understand your niche. So I started off with no money, right? Not much money. I mean, as an appraisal business, I was making a living, a nice living, but I wasn't accumulating a lot of cash. So I needed to figure out how I could build a business and build my first building without that. So I needed an edge. And so my edge was that I could do business with the government. So I could either buy a property from them, or I could lease them a property. But I could buy it and get it where other people maybe couldn't get it, and get it at a good price, or I could structure a deal where I lease them office space to where it would guarantee a building's profitability. So that was the first thing. So using what I had, which was I was building some political relationships, and I had a good relationship with the mayor of the city. So that was my initial course. So it was just finding the deal that kind of fit into my skill set. Yeah. And I didn't. My skill set wasn't that I could execute on a development project. My skill set is I could figure out how to find an opportunity within that spectrum. Yeah. And that was the first thing I did. And so I think that aspiring developer needs to say, what's my way in? How do I get my way in? What are my resources? If I have money or somebody who's willing to put money behind me, then that opens up a wide array of opportunity. But if you don't have access to capital, then you've got to look at, okay, well, what kind of business can I do without capital? Well, I've got to find something, a deal that can attract capital, or I got to get into a real estate deal where capital is not required initially. And so figuring that part out, and that could be developing affordable housing where you can borrow most of the money to do that. Or, I mean, it's doing like I did within the government. And the government is not looking at getting the maximum price, they're looking for outcome. And the governments want to provide opportunities reflective of the population demographics. So figuring that niche out, that's the first step.
Yeah. What's the amount of capital that someone may need? Like if you had to come up with a number, right? What's that number?
I mean, it depends. So on the deal that I did, my first deal, we needed to buy a property that was $900,000, and so we could borrow some of that money, and the balance of that money would be equity. So I think in the beginning we needed $500,000 in total for pre-development expenses and the down payment for the property, and then somebody credit worthy enough to do that. So $500,000. I think today, to do an affordable housing development that's kind of small, maybe 50 units or something like that, you'd need to start off with $1 million probably to do that.
And you can borrow that money if you don't have it?
There are nonprofit organizations that'll make loans there, but you'll need a credit-worthy partner, or be credit-worthy yourself.
Will you be my partner?
Sure.
They got that on camera, I'm telling you. So that $1 million today, if you had $1 million to invest in today and you want to do real estate, you're saying you can start with the affordable housing route?
Yes.
And build 50 units?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you could also start with a house.
Right. Well, you know, I'm glad you said that because you actually did it differently. I was listening to a podcast that you did, and you did not buy your first property. You bought it to rent it out, but you didn't buy it to live in it. And you got me rethinking my whole strategy now. Right. Would you advise that for somebody that has capital and maybe they're ready to go out in this very tough climate and the interest rates are still high? Would you advise them to buy a house or to look for a property, rent it out, and try to make income? Because as you said, you can pay down debt while somebody's being there, right? And commercial properties are great because those are 20-year leases, right? So the people can't leave just as easy as somebody in a residential. But would that be the route that you would take before maybe buying a house in this climate, maybe going and getting an investment property?
Absolutely, because look, I looked at it this way. The house I would buy then would not be the house that would be my forever house. I was very optimistic about my future. I felt that, you know, as I learned the real estate business, I felt, hey, that, you know, that I'm going to make some money. And so I made a decision that I was going to invest in my future, and my future wasn't a house. My future was building some buildings, and I needed to get the first one going. And I could buy a house in. So my first house that I bought was $925,000. Back then, that'd be about $3 million or so today. And so that was my first house. It was in Georgetown, and it was a home that was built for the grandson of the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall. And so that was kind of how I looked at it, because I could live anywhere. I mean, but I was trying to build a business, and I think that.
Well, that was after you sold that building, right?
No, actually, I didn't have to even sell it. I still own that building.
You still own it?
Yes.
Okay. That infrastructure, how important was that? Because again, here you are working in politics, and that's a monster in its own. I definitely I know that's a part of how you built your wealth. Relationships are very key. But that infrastructure of you knowing tax properties, knowing zoning and redevelopment, how much was that critical for you in building your wealth and career? Like actually going and doing that education about the taxing, the zoning law, all of that stuff?
Very helpful, because understanding how value is created or how value is lost, then that means I should be able to go and replicate how value is created. And so I learned how value was created. And I think that if you're going to go into any business, you want to be a student of the business. I mean, I read, part of my morning routine is I read 7 to 8 newspapers every morning, and then summaries of magazines and real estate publications. So I'm informed as to what's going on in the marketplace and learning every day. And it sparks other ideas. So being a student of the business and understanding it is key. And you can self-teach yourself. You don't need to sit in and lecture with a professor, you know,
teaching you wrong things.
Right, and sometimes teaching you wrong things, right? And so I figured I would learn from the people who knew how to do it. So I was a friendly person, so I could become friendly with developers and get to know them, and I'd read a lot and studied. So I think that knowledge base was instrumental in me doing my first deal and all these other deals.
Yeah. A quote that I love, you said, to get something done in D.C., you have to be quiet like a rat pissing in cotton. A friend told you
I
that.
got that from one of my mentors.
Yeah.
He was Billy Fitzgerald. He was the chairman and founder of the largest black-owned savings bank in the country.
Yeah.
And one of the people I played poker with on a regular basis. And he used to tell me that in D.C. you want to be real quiet.
Yeah. Well, I bring that up is because is that critical today? Because I mean, we're in a very noisy environment with social media, right? I mean, me and you were just talking on camera about just on Instagram.
Right.
But I still think that there's that essence of being quiet and moving as you're trying to build wealth. Is that something that you would advise?
I mean, I think you should be, right? And you shouldn't share your ideas with everybody either. And you shouldn't be talking about your plans to anybody outside of a very close inner circle. You should just be executing. The thing that happened to me was very different, though. I was quiet. I followed his advice. But I started becoming successful. And I was competing for deals against the big developers. And they perceived me as a threat to their dominance. I had a great relationship with the mayor of the city and most of the city council. It was a predominantly black city. I'm a black developer. I was what they were waiting for and what they were trying to have. And so they saw me as a threat. And so every time I beat them, they would use the Washington Post to attack me and investigate me. And so I said, okay, and everybody's all in DC, they're all low key, and the government people are all quiet, and they get nervous. They don't want to be in the media back then. And so I realized that it was going to be used against me. And after the third time, I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to understand the media, and I'm going to do it better. And I'm not going to ever be in a position to where it can be used as a weapon against me. And the one deal that I lost, solely because of the media, I was $58 million less expensive. It was a better deal for the city. But the Washington Post kept hammering and hammering. And the developer who lost to me hired a PR firm to negatively attack me. So I learned. I hired the former chairperson of American Express's wife, Linda Robinson, her firm, and Marina Ein at the time, who had represented Mike Milken when he was having his difficulties. And they helped me, navigate it, but they also taught me a bit about the media. And from that point on, I just made a decision it would not be used as a weapon against me.
Yeah, you said you wouldn't run from it. You want to embrace it at every step.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. How many failures did you have to endure before you finally became successful? Like, do you know how many you had to go through?
Yeah, I mean, I went through, they were visions and ideas that didn't get done. And that's kind of how I looked at it, but they were great lessons. So I looked at the failures as lessons. And so when I wanted to get into development, I scoured the city and the area I wanted to be in and found the properties owned by the government that my mentor was running the government. And so first when I came up with an idea, was a couple blocks from my apartment, where I could take a property that was a fire station and a police substation and redevelop it and relocate them. And I pitched it to the deputy mayor for economic development, pitched it to the mayor, couldn't get him to do it. Then there was a incinerator down the street from my office. It's an old incinerator in Georgetown in DC. And I had an architect draw up some plans and so forth, pitched it to the mayor, and he liked it. And then, the deputy mayor at the time talked to him about it for economic and couldn't get him to do it. And so it was the third deal that was a charm. And that was 2100 Martin Luther King Avenue when I got the opportunity to do that. And that walked into my office as opposed to me going to look for it. But without those other two deals, I wouldn't have done 2100 because the partners that I got for the second deal, the police substation and the fire station and library, those partners, while we didn't get that, when the deal for 2100 came in, they were right there. So I said, hey, we're going to work together on this deal, but now we can work together on this deal. And we did, and we've had a successful partnership that's lasted almost 35 years. Yeah. And so I learned from those lessons. And just to remind myself, when I go back to D.C., because both of those sites ultimately got developed. It took 2 decades to do it, but they got developed. And so the incinerator is now the Ritz-Carlton of Georgetown. So when I go into D.C., I stay at the Ritz-Carlton in Georgetown. Wow. And I request a suite in the portion of the hotel that's in the old incinerator. Yeah. Just so I can remind myself, hey, I had the vision, because that's the plan I had, so I was right on my vision, I just wasn't able to execute it.
Well, you had a vision here. You joined this bath club, right?
Yep.
1996,
yep.
mistaken?
Yep.
And 2 years later, you bought it for $10 million. Does it feel the same when you walk into this place, knowing that what the history was, not even allowing Black people to join, and now here you are owning it? Is it feel any different today, even though you've owned it for over 2 decades now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel, I mean, we were very successful in developing a luxury condo tower on the parking lot and the tennis courts of the club. And then I kind of looked at the club as just a necessary process. I mean, I wasn't into the country club scene and social club
this was the
scene.
ancillary part
Right.
of it, yeah.
And so I joined the club because my wife and I had an apartment 2 blocks down across the street on the Bay Side, and our young son liked the beach. And so we joined it for that reason. And then it turned out I was the first Black member of the club, which was also interesting because I'd never known anything like that in DC. So when the opportunity to buy it came about, I liked the symbolism. It was very important. Every deal that I had done was all about making a big impact. And I thought, wow, first Black member buys a club. That's a great symbolism. So I said, okay, let's challenge ourselves to figure out, can we make money owning it? And then we looked at, what we would do with it, and then made a decision to buy it. So I felt good. We did, made a lot of money to help grow the company off of building the condos. And that wasn't easy either, by the way. I mean, it was hard getting financing for it. And then after that, after owning it and having years of experience, I bought out the club members because I let them, part of my deal was they could continue to run their club. And so I finally bought them out and then kind of closed it. Yeah. And then decided to reopen it in 2019. My wife and I said, oh, we should do something with this place. And so we decided to relaunch it. But we wanted to do it very differently. And Katrina came up with the tagline, exclusively inclusive. And I said, okay, well, that's what we're going to build around. We're going to build a club that's exclusive, but it's going to be ultra inclusive. It's going to reflect the demographics of this country and of Miami. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we were able to do. And that feels good. And so seeing things take place here, and seeing events and seeing the members here and seeing people interact here, that feels good.
Yeah. When you're sitting out back and maybe somebody doesn't know who you are, and are you listening to how they talking about the place?
Yes.
It's like undercover balls, right?
Yes.
You just sitting down listening. Yeah.
Yep.
What are your clients or what are your members? What are they saying? Like, what is something that you heard? You said, we got to get better at this.
Well, I think the positive thing of what people like about the club is that it's private. We have some very wealthy, very prominent members, and they like the idea that they can have some anonymity and go to the beach and be there with their family. This is a family club, so people can bring their kids here. The kids feel safe here. They're comfortable here. They can, we've got lots of activities for them. And then it's a nice place to for social events and business events. We've got a couple ballrooms here. So I think that what we have done well is to execute on those things. And what we want to do better is to add another dimension to it, to give it a nightlife a little bit, so we can attract a younger demographic as well here.
Yeah.
But I'm very pleased with what we've done here. Great staff, great team of people.
Yeah.
And again, I love the history. It was a restricted club, no blacks, no Jews, and the bylaws said no blacks, no Jews, no dogs. And it was no coloreds, no Jews, no dogs. And in fact, the bylaws had a prohibition of Black people being on the property at all. So when members had Black servants, the rules required, and it says Black servants, if a member has a colored servant, then that servant could unload members' belongings and then give it to a white staff member who could take it to the members' cabanas. So that's how racist this place was. But this club and the cycle that it's gone through with me owning it is a very positive reflection on the evolution of America and on the evolution of Miami. And the sole reason that I voluntarily designated this building as a historic landmark is I think it's very important for people to remember what America and what Miami was like for those who came before us, so that we don't repeat it again.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, another piece of getting to some updates now, and another piece of real estate that you definitely want to leave some symbolism is the Affirmation Tower in New York, $3.4 billion cost. That would be a 2 million square foot structure, right? The
Yes.
largest in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And it has the symbolism, right? A National Civil Rights Museum would be a part of that. You have the observation deck, retail space, the convention center, mixed income apartments. I know there was some clarity on whether affordable housing would be right for that particular property. But here you are, as we go through your career, finding those same obstacles to get that project done. Politics, relationships. Where's the update on that, project, and what's the politics behind it? Like, what is it going to take to see that come to fruition?
Well, that building Affirmation Tower is a dream. It's
Yeah.
similar to, look, it reminds me, one of my favorite quotes, Robert Kennedy used to use it a lot, but it's from George Bernard Shaw. And it was that some men see things as they are and they ask, why? I dream of things that never were and ask, why not? And in New York City, which is known for skyscrapers, there's not one built by a black developer. There's not a skyscraper in the United States of America developed by a black developer. So when the opportunity came about to build on Site K, which is this site on 11th Avenue and 35th Street across from the Jacob Javits Convention Center in New York City in Manhattan, we looked at it, we almost passed on it, but we said, I looked back at it and I said, look, let's try to do something different. And so let's build a tall building. Let's see what we can do here. So we did that. We started looking at sketches, and then the building topped out at like 900 feet. And I said, wait a minute, we're already up that high. What's the tallest building in New York? And it was One World Trade. And I said, okay, so, and One World Trade has a spire on the top, which is many of them do to increase height. So we decided to build a 1,667 foot tall building to the roof line, which would make it the tallest in the Western Hemisphere. And because I felt that the first skyscraper developed by African Americans should make a point. And so it was a long time coming. And so if it gets done, then it should make that statement and also be an attraction to New York and help revitalize New York. And so that is what we propose doing. And look, I think one of the things in business that I've learned, and it's very important for any entrepreneur, is recognize our limitations. I know my limitations. I know, where if somebody's sitting on the other side doing business with us, I ask myself, what would I look at and what would be concerning to me? And then we try to solve for that. So one of them is I've never built a tall building in New York City. So, and certainly not one that's 1,667 feet tall, but the tallest residential building happens to be developed by a friend of mine in New York City, and that's Stephen Witkoff. And so he and I are friends, our family are friends, our sons are very close friends, and we do business together. So I said, look, let's do this together. And so Witkoff and our company are co-developing it, but I said, look, this needs to be majority black owned and super majority black owned for what I'm trying to do. Right. And he agreed with the concept and the message, and it was a long time overcoming, was excited to be a part of something so transformational. And so it's a big barrier to break. It'll be the biggest barrier I've ever broken. It'll be the biggest deal and the most important deal I've ever done. Yeah. And so hopefully we'll get it done. I mean, look, I've got the mayor of Atlanta encouraging me to bring it to Atlanta. And the governor of Maryland would love to see it in Maryland. So
but your heart's
we're going to build. My heart's in New York if they let us.
Yeah.
And that's really what this boils down to. I hope the
but
governor.
But you always say that New York is a center of capitalism. A building like that, does it? I mean, I love Atlanta and Maryland is great, but doesn't it belong in New York?
Not necessarily, because Atlanta is a mecca of African American entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It's basically outside of Hollywood. It is the capital of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
It stands for economic progress. It stands for the civil rights movement. It stands for black excellence. And also, I think that, what New York has stood for black Americans is an obstacle, a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter that there's only been one black developer that owns a major building south of 110th Street, which is a barrier of Harlem, is me. And that just happened in 2013. That tells you that there are significant headwinds. And unfortunately, those headwinds are, they're systemic. They have been there so long, they're just a part of the fiber. So it takes a transformative leader to challenge that. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that we see that, but look, I get people don't like my politics, right? That I say, hey, black people should be doing business with whomever's president because we don't have time to waste. And so that maybe rubs people the wrong way. And so
you gotta be quiet like a rat pissing on cotton.
Yeah, but you can't build a $3.4 billion building quietly.
That's right.
Right? And you can't knock down barriers. What I did learn, by the way, Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers and Malcolm X and so many others were quietly trying to change the Jim Crow laws. You and I wouldn't be sitting here today. Yeah. They had to do it loudly. And the reality is that to knock down a systemic structural barrier that has existed for so long, it's going to take a big fight. Again, it's not like, hey, African Americans developers are 10% of the development community, or they're doing 10% of the buildings. They're doing none in Manhattan. They're only doing affordable housing by and large.
Put us in a box.
Yes, yeah. Or they're doing it in Harlem or the Bronx, right? But when it comes to Manhattan, the epicenter of capitalism, they've been telling us a long time it's not for us.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to fight hard as I can, and hopefully we'll get it done in New York. And if not, I'm going to take it somewhere else and get it built.
Yeah. Well, another piece of passion project is yours. In 2019, you had launched a $500 million fund to help minority developers, women in areas New York, Los Angeles, D.C., Philly, where I'm from. Any update there? Yeah,
actually, a good friend of mine who's been in the asset management business for decades, Doug McNeely, who was at BlackRock for many, many years. He left. He and I are joint venturing on a firm called Donahue Douglas. It's an asset management firm, and we are getting ready to go out to the market for an emerging developer fund. We're going to raise $1 billion for the first fund, right. and we're building an asset.
Is this an add-on to that $500 million?
It'll be an add-on to that $500 million, and we've got a lot of interest in it, and we're going to roll it out in the beginning of the year in terms of our fundraising, and we're much more optimistic because. And by the way, I think that what happens in this country is there's a perception that doing business with African Americans or doing business on diversity is philanthropic, but it's not. It's great business opportunity. If I told you that you could have the entire country of the United Kingdom to yourself and provide all the capital to the real estate industry, everybody would rush to do it. Well, imagine serving a severely underserved market right here. You don't have to leave this country to find an emerging market. We don't have to go to Vietnam. We don't have to go to China. We don't have to go anywhere else. We can do it right here because African American entrepreneurs have been denied access to capital. $87 trillion of capital is invested in venture capital and private equity right now.
Yeah.
Yes, but less than 1.3% of it is invested in firms run or owned by people of color and women combined. So that's systemic discrimination when it comes to the deployment of capital, and I'm going to fight very hard to change that. And that's part of what keeps me going in the business now, is to knock down barriers that other people confront, and that I know that are there because I've confronted them. I know it's unfairly difficult for black entrepreneurs to get started or grow their business. It's unfair for women who want to start a business or grow a business. And the fact that 98.7% of all venture capital and private equity money goes to white men shows how imbalanced this system is. And so my job, and many others should join me on this, is to demonstrate that deploying capital and providing capital to people who have not had access to it, who are talented and competent, is good business and very profitable.
Yeah. A couple more things I want to let you get out of here because there's a beach outside and we're in Miami and you want to relax a little bit. But before looking at bigger picture things, talk to that real estate agent because things are changing for the real estate agencies. Brokerage fees and things like that. The next 5 years, as we hit 2025, midway point of the decade, what would you tell that real estate agent? Because we have a lot of people in the Black community that are real estate agents, and right now, the market is in the sectors going to be very different for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think we've got to embrace technology. I deal with when I wasn't a real estate agent, I deal with real estate agents and brokers constantly, and the ones that are successful are providing value to their clients, enlightening them, giving them information, giving them strategic direction and so forth. The real estate industry as a whole has been a low-tech business. It has not embraced technology in terms of marketing, in terms of sales, in terms of operations, but that's changing. And we're seeing the example of that. What drove this change in laws in this lawsuit was the fact that technology made the information of what homes are on the market readily available to the consumer without having to go through a broker. So I would say that adding value, as a real estate agent, you want to add value. You have to be a student of the business. And then also bring your customers properties that are not on the market. I mean, we don't normally buy properties that are on the open market because we want a competitive advantage. So finding value for your customer, being someone who's educating them and adding value to making it so that your fee is worthwhile to them. I think that's the answer to it. And then to start looking at a broader customer demographic. I think there's an unlocked opportunity for brokers, like we talked about earlier, to get into the real estate business. People can be part-time real estate investors. They can have a job and do other things. And maybe they buy a house, renovate it, and resell it. My wife has had some great success in buying luxury homes, redoing them, and selling them. So I think that that's what agents can do, is bring those kinds of deals to broaden their customer line. And then I think they're going to be able to prosper and use technology to prosper.
Yeah. Looking ahead now, we have a new administration coming in. I know me and you talked about this in passion and aside, but if President-elect Trump calls you up and says, Don, what advice would you have me about leveling the playing fields in real estate? What do you tell him?
Well, same thing we talked about when he was president-elect and then president, was I think we've got to unlock access to capital. Unlock access to capital, and that starts at the federal government level. The federal government uniform pension system has nearly 200 asset managers, and I think 3 of them are Black. So think about that, 3 out of 200. That can change. The president can change that. He ought to look at doing legislation that requires public employee pension systems and any other pension system that gets the benefit of federal laws or federal tax policies such as not-for-profits and the like, that in order to continue to get those benefits, that their investments need to be more reflective of the population demographics. And I think also he's got to unlock federal government contracting in a different way, and to break those contracts up to make them smaller so that they can be more accessible to Black entrepreneurs. The thing about him versus a Biden or versus an Obama is he's a business person. So having that conversation with him, he totally understands it, and he can give direction on executing it because he understands business. And I think that if we as Black entrepreneurs and Black Americans say we are receptive to doing business with this administration, I think we'll find on the opposite side, he will be very interested and receptive to doing business with us and knocking down these systemic barriers to economic opportunities. And so my advice is engage, for him to engage, and for him to lead with some policy objectives. And I think we're going to see that. And I think he's got to expand opportunity zones too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now for the black community, I mean, you just mentioned about doing business with the new administration. What would you tell members of the black community? Again, we got 5 years until we reach 2030. By the time 2030 comes, President-elect Trump won't be around anymore, right? Won't be in office. But what do you tell them how to navigate the next 4 to 5 years, especially with all the rhetoric that's going to be out there, the social media, the misinformation, and my industry's fighting that every single day. What do you tell black entrepreneurs, black people of all classes about how to deal with the next 4 years? Because you probably hear, I mean, there's a lot of nervousness out there. People are scared. They're thinking that we're going to go back to prehistoric times, and I don't go that far, but there are people concerned, and they're not looking at it from the business side. What would you tell them?
Well, first of all, if I listened to and believed all I heard in the media, I'd be terrified too.
Yeah. That's why you only got to listen to Forbes.
Exactly. Look, I know that I don't see Donald Trump as a threat to democracy any more than I see that when the Democratic Party forced Biden out of the race and anointed Kamala Harris without a single vote as a threat to democracy. And one could argue that that is undemocratic. Yeah. But I think the reality is, what I would tell black entrepreneurs and black Americans is Donald Trump will be president for 4 years unless something unforeseen happens to his health or the like. But the chances are high that for the next 4 years, starting January 20th, 25, he will be the president of the United States. So we got to make a decision. Do we stop doing business, or do we engage in business and look for the opportunity? Every setback is an opportunity in disguise. That's how I've done business. Each setback is an opportunity in disguise. If you supported somebody else, his winning can be an opportunity in disguise. If you supported him, it's going to be a great opportunity because you understand that this is an economic journey. I'd say that, one of the philosophies I've had, I learned it from Henry Kissinger. When Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State, his philosophy in terms of America was America had no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, just permanent interests. African Americans, we need to have no permanent friends in politics, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. And that interest is moving us forward. Our home ownership rates are lower than they've been in my lifetime. And they were the highest in my lifetime under George W. Bush in 2004 at nearly 50%. We lag behind white Americans in income and wealth by obscene disparities. So we have to do some things differently, and that is focusing on an economic agenda, and I would say engage and challenge this president to do that, not wasting the energy of being a part of the resistance, but being a part of moving this country forward, because he's will be the president of the United States, and we want him to do well because we want the country to do well, but we want to do well in that process, and we can only do well in that process by engaging him.
Yeah. Art of War is one of your favorite books. What's one of the techniques in that book that you use in business daily?
I would say that it's the art of deception, because when you are strong, that's when you should be the most magnanimous, and when you are weak, that's when you need to show strength. And then when things are on an equal playing field, then you're negotiating from a perspective of conciliation. And I think that strategy overall is reasonably effective, and you'll see it coming from others as well. Yeah. And then I think that the one thing is that you want to always be able to get to the higher ground. And I think the higher ground in terms of how you conduct yourself also.
Yeah. The future of real estate, is it like, are we going up like the Jetsons? I keep on thinking, I mean, you have Amazon developing, their drone and the pilot. I'm seeing the tech that they're building, and it's only delivering packages now through the air. And I'm thinking, man, in the future, are we headed up because of climate change and those things? Is that where we're going?
Well, you mean where the real estate is in
Yeah,
the air
building up,
or
right?
building
We're
up?
building up, right? And it's not more homes on land, especially in areas where you can get flooded. But are we going up now? Is that what we're going to see over the next maybe 50 years?
Well, I think in supply-constrained areas, you're definitely going to see taller buildings, because the skyscrapers in New York, for example, are all about running out of space. And so you run out of land area, so you need to go up. And so I think we'll see that as a better use of land. And ultimately, there's always this pushback. The environmentalists don't want to see the tall buildings, and then the people who are living in these communities, somehow tall buildings are bad things, but ultimately they're the most respectful of the environment, and they're the ones that preserve land more. And so I think we will go up. You're seeing that in other cities now. Look at Miami, for example.
Yeah, and it was beautiful too. That's what I'm saying. I got to get out of here. I want to go to the beach and look up at the buildings. Get you out of here on this. Good to Great. Always in my conversations like this. Jim Collins wrote his business book, Good to Great, one of my favorites. What's the difference between a good real estate developer and a great one?
Not quitting.
Not quitting. That was simple.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask you another one then. If somebody's sitting on the sideline, and I'll really get you out of here on this, and they have not participated in real estate yet, but you know that you can build real estate through wealth, what would be your advice to that person sitting on the sideline?
I look for some opportunities if I'm an investor. And I think real estate, it's a long-term investment. So I would look at being an investor in real estate, and I would try it out. I would either try it out with a house or a small apartment building, but I would buy an existing asset and kind of create some value by redoing it. I would invest in the community I live in or within the area that I live in, because I'd understand the market better, and I'd try to anticipate what the trends are. Where are people moving to? Where is there undervalued property and it's close proximity to where people want to live? And that'll ultimately, you'll see growth there. So I'd pick a location that I knew, and I'd get into the mix. I'd either buy a house or a small rental property, and then get that working and stabilized, and then go to the next one.
Yeah, call you up and get some more capital and keep it going.
Yes. Well, look, the Emerging Developer Fund that we are going to launch, the goal there is to provide capital to entrepreneurs who don't have access to it. So normally the way people get started in real estate is they get an investment from a friend or a family member, or investments from friends and family. So most people, especially most Black Americans, don't have friends and family who can drop hundreds of thousands of dollars into a real estate deal for somebody else. And so that fund that we're doing is going to step in and provide capital to scale up, and to help developers scale up, grow, get started and scale up. Yeah. And so I think that, the thing is for people to start looking for opportunities. And if they find those investments, they can figure out how to find capital. It may not be easy, but they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Don Peebles, congrats on the success that you've had in your career in real estate. You've built wealth, so I have to salute you on that. And we have to do this more often, because there's so much more to talk about when it comes to the sector.
Well, thank you, and I've enjoyed this very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Don Peebles here at the Bath Club, building wealth through real estate.